and
You're on.
I'll start with an introduction to Celia. The goal is, she'll give a little talk for a while. Celia, do you prefer if people ask questions while you're speaking or wait till the end?
I don't mind, whichever way you want. They can ask while I'm talking, yes.
Okay.
That might be a good idea.
So what I'm going to do once we start is I'm going to mute everyone. And if you have a question, you can unmute yourself to ask the question, okay? That will just cut down on, background noise so that Celia can hear a little better for all of us.
Leah, can I make a suggestion that actually maybe people put the questions in the chat? That way they can, you're not going to run the risk of anyone misunderstanding the question, and you can sort of take them as they come and maybe see that might be some questions that are overlapping. So
absolutely, that's a great suggestion. I'm happy to do it. If there's anyone who's calling in, they won't be able to do that. But I will monitor the chat. So if you have a question, write it in the chat if you can, and if you can't, write it down on a piece of paper, and we'll get to you in the end. And then afterwards, this is just intended to be a way to meet up and talk and have community. So feel free to talk and just enjoy this time together.
And today is Sunday, December 20th, the year 2020.
Thank you for that. It is 4:05 p.m., so I think we'll get started. Just give a quick introduction to Celia for those who don't already know her. Celia is going to be talking today about the Blitz in England, which was a very intense bombing campaign at the beginning of World War II, and she'll go into the details. But Celia was 16 years old at the time that this started, living in England when World War II broke out. Her family owned a tailoring shop. Is that right, Celia? In Stepney?
Yes.
And Stepney was a neighborhood near the docks, so they could actually see all the bombs and the fire falling around them from the Blitz in London. Her family was evacuated from Stepney 3 separate times, but they always came back to their neighborhood because they really loved living there. Eventually in 1943, so 3 years later, her family moved to another town called Blackpool. And there she met Mark King, who they got married and opened a jewelry store, which they ran there for many decades. Then in 1967, fast forwarding, Celia and their sons, Alan and Selwyn, they went to Israel to see their father before deciding to emigrate to America. Once they went to America, they went to California and settled in La Jolla, where Celia and her husband were one of the founding members of Temple B'nai Aaron. Mark became the first president of the temple, and they were very involved in the community there. And then when they went in 1990 for Selwyn's wedding in Hawaii, they said, oh my gosh, we have to come here. So they moved to Hawaii in 1990 and immediately joined Temple Emmanuel. Celia, since that time, was awarded a medal for her Yiddish translations of a Russian family immigrating to Hawaii. And she writes about many of her experiences. And you can find those essays online. I'll put the link in the chat or an email. So that's the background. Celia, why don't you take it away? Tell us about the Blitz and your feelings of the parallels that are happening in the world today.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yes, take it away.
Okay. Well, I was asked to make comparisons.
Celia, you've shut your sound off.
Now you're good.
Shall I start again?
Please.
Okay. I was asked to make comparisons between World War II and the Blitz, where I was right in the worst part of it in London, near the docks, to make comparisons between that and the virus, that's what's going on in the world today. And it's difficult to make comparisons, but there are some similarities. The main one is the feeling of not knowing what's going to happen next. Then we were afraid of the bombs dropping on us, which they were doing, but who's going to get it next? And this time it's the same thing with the virus. We don't know who's going to be next. So there's a comparison there. We are using the face masks these days, but we were all issued with gas masks in case of gas, and they were those big ugly things issued in a brown cardboard box that we had to carry on our shoulder, and it was compulsory. You had to have it with you at all times. Eventually, a lot of ladies decided they wanted it to look better, so we would buy a cover for the box to snap on. But we had to have them with us. Also, we had to have a very strict blackout. There wasn't a light to be shown, and not a gleam of light to be shown after dark. And that was a very serious offense if you showed a light. So there was a shortage of material in the shop that we sold materials. So we would have everything dyed black. The sheets, anything you could, you would dye black to hang up on the windows to keep the light out. So that's another, and the other comparison I can make is that these days people are getting material to make face masks for us. So that's another comparison. What else? There's but the main thing is that feeling of being unsettled. You know, you can't really plan regarding weddings or anything at all, really, that we have to put it off. And that was the same thing. Regarding the bombing, as you heard, I lived in the worst area because we were only 10 minutes walk from the docks, which was a big park as well. That's where the German bombers were going for. So we got it. Actually, before the war, we expected the war for 1 year. We were expecting any day to have the war in that was 1938, and I left school just before that. For 1 year, we were all on edge with Hitler because he was invading Europe. Eventually, there was an ultimatum given to England. Mr. Chamberlain, our prime minister at the time, went to talk to Hitler because we called him Mr. Chamberlain. We called him peace at any price. And we didn't want that. And it didn't work. So they told us there's going to be an announcement on September the 3rd, 1939, 11 a.m. in the morning. So we all sat round the radio because there was no TV in those days. and waiting for the announcement. And the announcement was, we are at war with Germany. And that's how it all started. Well, we all thought the bombs were going to drop on us immediately. We didn't know what to expect. My dad had ordered a taxi cab to take us to the station to go to be evacuated if that happened. So we were prepared, and we got to this house. It was a great big house in a tiny, tiny village called Three Bridges, about 40 miles from London. And he'd given one, it was ancient. There was no gas or electricity or water. For water, you had to go down to the cellar and pump. There was a pump. We lived there for 3 months, and then realized the bombs not many bombs were being dropped. So we went back to our home in London. And then a year afterwards, the bombing really started. Luckily for us, a neighbor, the grocers in our street, Watley Street, said, why don't you come and take shelter with me? Because I have a shelter issued, but we didn't have room for one in our home. So we couldn't have one. We went and we said, okay. So my sister and I and my mum and dad went with this couple and sat in this shelter. It's called an Anderson shelter. And all of a sudden we heard droning much heavier than we'd ever heard it before. And the planes, they seemed so loud. There were so many of them. And we can recognize the German sound. The German planes sounded different to the English ones. So there was a very heavy droning, so that we couldn't believe what we were hearing. And of course, we were terrified that night because we could hear the bombs dropping all around us. When we thought we heard them return. We could hear them returning the other way. And when we peeped out, everything was on fire. It was unbelievable. The sky, it was dawn by then. The sky was an ugly, sulfury red. And it was unbelievable. It was like hell. So that was the night my parents lost everything. It was all destroyed in the bombing. And so we had to leave London. My uncle, my mother's younger brother, he came searching for us, not expecting to find us alive because there was rubble everywhere. And he was in another part of London that had not been bombed all that badly. So he said, you've got to come with me. You can't stay here. There's nothing for you to stay for. So, in compensation, which is what, about $40 or something like that. So that was the compensation you got. But anyway, anybody want to ask any questions?
We have one question in the chat. Someone asks, how did you feel about Churchill replacing Chamberlain? They know that Churchill was half American.
How do I feel about Churchill?
Replacing Chamberlain.
Churchill saved us. He was so fantastic. He was our God during the war. He would come on the radio very often and make speeches. and everyone was a gem, giving us so much courage, never letting us feel down, even at the worst of times. He was really a wonder, and I admire him very much. And I have a photo here that a pen friend of mine, this is before I was married, in France, was working at this hotel where Churchill went just after the war, and he took this photo of Churchill coming out the door in south of France. Can you see it?
Yes, that's great. Who's the woman next to him?
Don?
You know
Oh,
who
well,
that
I
is?
think they're his bodyguards around him. And the story is, my pen friend Pierre told me, he came to England eventually to visit me. Churchill wanted to grab the camera and smash it to the ground because he said he doesn't want his photo taken. He was on holiday, you know, he was relaxing there. But my pen friend said, I'm not going to publish it or anything. I'm sending it to England to a pen friend, that's all. So he relented, he let him keep the camera. So that's the story of that photo. And it was in the south of France, called Juan Le Pan, on the Riviera, that hotel. My pen friend worked there at the time. Anyway, is there anything else? So as regarding Churchill, I don't know. I feel that that's what we need today in America. We need a Churchill to lead us. You know, we respected everything he said. It doesn't matter what your politics were. You just adored him because he made sense and he had such a powerful voice. You've probably seen him on television or, you know, parts that were acting for Churchill. He was the people that I've seen on television that taking part, his part, and nothing nearly as powerful as he was. Exceptional. So that's my feeling about Churchill. I wish we had him here today. He would have solved it. We would have done something good for us all. Any other questions?
If you have a question, you'll have to unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat and I can unmute. Or actually, I'll just unmute. Let me unmute everyone. Please don't all talk at once.
Yeah, you can all talk at once.
Don't.
Let's see if I can do that.
You have another one. Did you ever shelter in the underground? Were there any in East End? Did you ever shelter in the underground?
Did I have a shelter in the underground? Yes.
And
As soon as war, as I told you, we had a taxi cab waiting to take us to the train station to be evacuated to this house in the middle of nowhere. And on the way, the siren went for gas. The gas siren went off. So we all had to, he stopped the cab by an underground station. We all put our gas masks on and everybody is running like crazy down the steps into the underground. We waited a while and then we, including the taxi driver, we waited a while, then we found out it was a mistake. That as soon as war was declared, that happened. But my husband spent, I don't know, months or years sleeping in the underground station. He was only 1 year older than me, but he was working as an apprentice jeweler in London, living at home, of course. He was only a kid. He would go to work, come home, pick up a blanket, run to the underground where his parents had gone earlier on to save a place, lying down on the just on the bare concrete in the underground, and save a place for him as well. And that's wake up, sleep there, but like sardines. They were all cramped together. But, you know, they could only get so many in, but there were a lot. Wake up in the morning, he would run back to the house, get washed, go back to work. And this went on for, I don't know if it was maybe a couple of years. That's how people lived, and it was a terrible way to live. But I was lucky that my parents took us away, because my sister was still at school and she's supposed to have been evacuated. All the kids were evacuated to the countryside. She refused to go. She's not going to leave her mum. We were very protected growing up, you know, very sheltered. So she refused to go. So that's why we all went, and we had nowhere to live anyway. We had to leave London. But we had many scary nights when one night, I think it was the night after we had the first bombing, that was in 1940, just a year after war was declared, when the really bad bombing started. And you never knew where it was going to hit next. My neighborhood and my street, there was nothing left of it. It was all rubble, the whole street. And we never knew what happened to our neighbors. We couldn't get in touch, you know, everybody dispersed. And we'd all lived there all of our lives. I was born there above the shop, and so was my sister. We never heard about what happened to any of them, because we weren't in touch. It wasn't like nowadays with computers. And so I don't know what happened to them. But what was the question?
We have one question. Someone asked, were there different sirens for different problems? You mentioned there was a gas siren. How did you know it was for gas rather than something else?
Oh, well, there was a different kind of siren. There was a special siren ahead of time, with this 1 year where we all thought war was going to break out. We had to go for different practicing and to find out what the sirens were like. And I had to take a Red Cross class as a teenager. I had to take classes with my dad as an air raid warden. I mean, all these things we were prepared for. So the siren was a different wailing. It was a horrible noise. I hate the sound of it, the wailing of the gas siren. So that's how we knew, by the sound of it. Anyway, that night, after this terrible, worst night of the Blitz, when everything was on fire, my uncle took us to his place, which was in a different area of London, Maida Vale, and went from door to door trying to get a place for us to sleep, just even for the one night, because we were worn out. We had no sleep. And they all said, we're full, we're sorry, we're full. So we would stand at the gate. We went with him. We would stand at the gate and he would go in, and every time this happened, in the end, we came to a church and they said, we're sorry, we're full, but maybe if you go in, one of you will have to stand all night. There's room for, there were 4 of us. So we said, okay, we'll take it. We would take anything to get in off the street. Well, there was an air raid going on when we were going to, looking for a place. And I can still see the searchlights swaying one way and the other. These searchlights looking for the planes. And we went into the church at last, and there we took turns standing up and spent the night there. We had many bad experiences, but somehow we got through it. And we went back to, after a while, in this big old house, but I have to tell you, I wasn't miserable about it because I was a young teenager, and to me, I didn't realize how serious it was, but it must have been hell for my parents, who were immigrants from Poland and had already been in World War I. My dad was conscripted as a greener when he just arrived. He couldn't speak a word of English, but they conscripted him anyway. And so they went through World War I, and this is 20 years later that they're in another war. So it must have been hell for them. But we children, me and my sister, I don't think we took it all that seriously. So we, for instance, in this house that we got to, was in the middle of a big field, in the middle of no neighbors, very old, as I said. And there were a few other youngsters like we were. He gave us one room each. We had to make do. And my mother had to cook, and we all slept. We had two beds, you know, I had to share with my sister. But we would have fun. The youngsters had fun. We would sit out on the grass and enjoy each other's company. We didn't realize the seriousness of it all. So we eventually went back to London, and after a while, in the next year, the real war started, the Blitz. And so we were bombed that time. The first time, it was the false war. The second time, it was the real thing. And so my parents lost the shop and the house, so they lost everything. My mum carried any money they had collected through working hard. She carried with her. People didn't trust the banks because I thought the bank might not be there the next day. It could be bombed. So my mother carried it in a brown leather bag, and everything she possessed. So we went to a place that we'd heard about in the country, a lovely village called Marlow, also about 40 miles from London. But it made a big difference because the bombers, they didn't want to waste their bombs on a village. They wanted to get the people in the town and the ships, you know, and the big buildings. They wanted it to be worthwhile throwing those bombs. So we felt fairly safe. But so we stayed in we couldn't find anywhere. The only place we could find was above a smelly fish and chip shop. And they also sold fresh fish. And the owner said, okay, but I'll let you go up and clean it out. You have to clean it out yourself, which we said, okay, we can do that. And one of your girls has to work for me in the shop. So I was the one chosen to work in this fish and chip shop and to learn how to fillet fish. And it was all so new to me because I'd brought up not doing anything in the kitchen. My mum did everything for us. So it was all an experience. And eventually I realized I'm getting towards 18. I'm going to be conscripted into the army because everybody was, girls and boys. So I was terrified of leaving home because I'd never been away from my mum for a day. So I volunteered to go into an aircraft factory to work. And believe it or not, I really enjoyed that part of my life. I met so many people that I would never have met otherwise, from all walks of life. So I worked in the aircraft factory for quite a while, a couple of years in that one. And then later I worked in another aircraft factory when we moved again. So any more questions?
We have a number of questions. Somebody asked about what about the stress of the war in your backyard and the dangers of being Jewish at the time?
Well, did you get it?
What did you do to deal with the stress of the war in your backyard? And what did you do to deal with the stress of the war being in your backyard?
What did I do?
To deal with the stress of the war happening.
I didn't have all that much stress. My parents must have gone through hell, but my sister and I don't think we realized how serious it was. So I didn't have a terrible, in fact, I think we thought it was a bit of fun, you know, moving around because we'd never moved before. And we were getting all these new experiences. We didn't realize how much we were in danger, that bomb could kill us at any moment. I don't think we realized it.
What about, did you realize about any dangers of being Jewish in the world at that time?
We realized that a lot before the war. We had what they call black shirts. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. The German sympathizers, the ones that sympathized with Germany, marched right through our street, and it was terrifying because they were, you know, such anti-Semites. And we always felt in England there was an anti-Semitic feeling in general, not every person, but in general. We always, when we came to America, we noticed such a difference in the attitude of people towards Jews. Yes, we felt it, but we didn't feel it. I don't think we felt it more during the war, maybe less, because we were all fighting together against Hitler. most of us.
That's very interesting. Someone else asks, how much did you know about the concentration camps during that time? Was anything told to you or around England during the war?
Cancer in our little town. But my mum said, we'll take it.
Oh no, I wonder if we lost her.
Problem solved.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, great, we hear you now.
You went off.
Problem solved.
Okay, my mum, my mum opened a guest house. We said, how can you do that? It was the only place available, and we wanted to live there because my mum's sister had evacuated there with her 3 little girls, about the same age as me and my sister were. And we'd been apart for a few years already. So my mum took this guest house and we all ran it together. And it was a success. We didn't make a fortune, but it paid its way and we had a lovely home to live in. So that was a good thing. What was that question again?
The concentration camps. Did you know?
Oh, about the concentration camp. Okay, we didn't know about it till later on, but the cantor in our shul there was one little shul, Orthodox, that we belonged to. He had a sister that was left in Czechoslovakia, where he came from with his wife. And one day on the radio, no TV yet, he heard her name. Jeanette Feldinger is looking for family. And the Red Cross gave her something to wear. She'd been in the concentration camp. I don't know how she got out, but she did. And she was hidden for 2 years by Christian farmers. She was hidden in the loft and she was my age. So when the Red Cross sent her, I can still picture what she was wearing, a thick navy blue coat. Well, in England, you need a thick coat. And she was a very outgoing girl, and they asked me if I'd befriend her because we were similar age. And it was a miracle because they didn't have much, in those days in England, the cantors didn't earn much money. It was just a small shul. They didn't earn much. And so, she had nothing. But my sister was getting married, although she was 1.5 years younger than me, but she was getting married to a nice man. And the cantor's wife was sick. So they said, can Jeanette come in her stead to the wedding and the dinner, of course, in a kosher hotel? We said, yes. Well, she sat next to this man who was a millionaire, not much to look at, but a good businessman and rich. And within a few weeks, he was came from a very Orthodox family where all the family wore shadels, wigs. The women, they all wore, and so they liked the idea that she was the cantor's sister. So they were happy with it. And within a few weeks, he proposed to her and they were married, and she lived a life of luxury after that. So that was a real Cinderella story. And so she used to tell us stories about the concentration camp. They used to come in every Saturday night to our guest house and
So Michelle's saying next to Celia. Michelle's in the other room like that, right?
things branded on her. So that was the one way that I knew. There were a lot of girls evacuated to where I lived there, Blackpool. So, and they, you know, somehow they all married well. And my best friends, Jeanette was one of them, and another two sisters were on that. Did you ever hear of the Kinder, what is it, the train, where they sent their children away on the train from Germany?
Yes.
Did anybody hear about that? Well, this Kinder, what did they call it? I don't know. Anyway, it was a train where they sent children out while they could still do it, and they knew they would never see them again. So these two sisters, Lily and Helga, their father was a doctor. They came to our town, and they were my age by the time I met them, and a very wealthy couple who had no children of their own took them in. They treated them that it was a beautiful home on the ocean that they lived in. But they did make them work to take care of the house and everything. But they also dressed them well and made sure they had the best of everything. So I used to hear about it, but they didn't want to talk much about it. But Jeanette used to sit there, and she was very outgoing and no makeup. She had these high cheekbones, like typical Czechoslovakian, and rosy cheeks. And she was very fascinating to talk to. And every time now, when I eat a piece of chocolate, it's sugar-free, that my son allows me to have every night, 2 pieces. Every time I eat a piece of chocolate, I think of her, because one night I took her to the theater, and we used to be able to order a tray of tea, you know, teacups and a teapot and milk, while you're sitting there, and during the interval, they would bring it. And when I took her, they didn't have any cookies. They used to automatically put cookies there with it, what we called biscuits. Well, they didn't have any that day. So I was apologizing to her, but we had chocolate. I bought some chocolate. So she said, and I was apologizing, there's no biscuit. She said, oh, very bad. We're sitting here in this lovely theater, drinking tea and eating chocolate. You know, so she makes me now even appreciate every little thing that you have, you know, as I think so. I think of her when I'm eating my chocolate. Any more questions?
Yes, was there any bombing during the day?
Not so much, but when I was in the village of Marlow at the beginning, before we went to Blackpool, evacuated, my little cousin from London, Gertie, came and stayed with us just to get away from London. And we were walking along the River Thames in Marlow, beautiful. And all of a sudden, there's this, what we called a dog fight above us. And they were dropping bombs on each other, the English and the Germans. And we were so, they were right where we were. So we threw ourselves down on the grass under a hedge. And it was a very close thing. Well, when she was crying, we got up. She said, I'm going back to London. And that was the only time that village was hit. But she didn't want it. She would rather be in London, she said. But I don't think there was so much. I don't know. I've wondered about that. How come they didn't bomb more? I think it was because they would be easily shot down in the daylight. By night, they couldn't be found to shoot them down. That's why they had the searchlights swaying about, you know, they would be swaying about those searchlights all the time in the dark.
Somebody
So I don't think, I'm sorry, I don't think there was all that much during the day. It was night. That's why we dreaded a full moon or a bright moon, because that's what they liked. They could see their way better. I'm sorry. What was the question?
Oh, it's very interesting. I was just going on another question. Somebody asked, were there any social or things that you could do, or social affiliations, or were you limited to just your training and your working during that time?
No. When we got back to London after the first evacuation to that house in Three Bridges, we'd made a friend there in this house. That she was another one with her parents, Nettie, and she introduced us to a wonderful Jewish youth group near where we lived, and it was called the Henricus Club. He was knighted after that. This couple, he was called Henricus. They gave up their life. They were very wealthy people that gave up their lives to buy a huge house, make it into a youth club, and they lived there and gave their whole lives to this place, and we loved it. We joined. They asked us to join, and we used to have dances. You know, that England didn't close down. They were proud of the fact of keeping going, and even the theatres in the West End of London, they all kept going. You know, they had to do it in the dark from outside, but they didn't close down. The only thing that closed down was the shops that were bombed, like ours. You know, the whole neighborhood was in ruins, so that was closed down. But otherwise, people were proud of the fact that they're not going to close down. You know, they're going to keep going.
Along those lines, we have a question from Rabbi Ken. He says, thinking about the people of London at that time who needed to find ways to move past the devastation and isolation from the Blitz, do you have any
No, we didn't.
for us?
I'm sorry.
You want me to repeat it?
Are you asking if we felt isolated?
Rabbi Ken was asking, what suggestions might you have for us today going about our lives with the impact of what's happening with this virus, and maybe when the vaccines allow us?
Well, I don't know what to say about that. But regarding it was just the opposite. We were not isolated at all. In fact, people, they were all rooting for the same thing. We all felt, you know, except for the anti-Semites, but most of the country was so much against Hitler. They made up songs. We had songs about it. And then we had, as I said, we had Churchill. We felt more together than ever. The country has never been the same since. It was a wonderful feeling that everybody was on the same page, you know. Regarding now, there are similarities, but all I can say is prayer. Pray. I pray a lot. I'm in contact with the one upstairs all the time. And I think being thankful for what you do have is really good for your health. Honestly believe that, because it's worked. It's, thank God, it's working with me. And I'm thankful. Every night I say my prayers and bless everybody that I know or even don't know. And I feel it's good for my health, being thankful. I can't think of anything else that we can do to help. I mean, it's something that's so different to anything else. It's a very different feeling, really. Although, there, as I said, there are some similarities, but it's no good feeling helpless. That's not going to help anybody. You've got to think of the good. When I'm down, I think of all the good things that have happened to me. I mean, we've all had bad things as well, but I think of the good things. So that's all I can think of, is put it in your mind to try and be positive and do the best you can to be safe. Don't take chances.
That's really great advice. We're getting near the hour mark. I'll ask if anyone else has questions. Can you unmute yourself and go ahead and ask them?
How did you celebrate the end of the war?
Oh, I remember I was walking in a park with my sister and a boyfriend of hers, and who was in the military, and he threw himself down on the grass and rolled and rolled and rolled. We just couldn't believe it. The main thing in my mind was, thank God no bombs are going to drop on my head, you know. That was the first thought I remember feeling. There's no bombs. I just couldn't believe it. But you know, everything's comparative. I remember when we first went to this guest house, I was just 21 by then. I mean, and the war was still on, and we all still had all these shortages, but we didn't starve. But I remember toasting a piece of toast in front of the open fire on a long fork, you know, and thinking, I'll never ask God for anything more again, because I felt, after being 3 years living in that stinky fish and chip shop above it, it was like going from rags to riches. This was a lovely house, the guest house. So I felt so thankful. I remember sitting there thinking, I will never ask for anything again. So it's all, although the war was still on, but regarding the end of the war, I know people went crazy in the streets. We didn't do that. We just felt happy together.
Celia, did you have a favorite wartime song during the war?
Pardon?
A favorite wartime song?
Yeah, there were wartime songs. That one was, what was it? Don't throw your washing on the Siegfried line. Have you ever heard of that one?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then that one was called Run, Rabbit, Run. There were usually comedy songs, you know, comedic songs. Yeah, we had lots of songs like that. And the theatres, they were thriving. I used to go down, in spite of the blackout and the war, I would go from, say, this is before I was married, I would go down to London to spend a couple of weeks every year out of season in the winter. And the theatres and caught it. Oh, one big thing that made a difference to us, the dance. We had beautiful big dance halls where I lived in Blackpool, and I loved dancing. I would go a few times a week, believe it or not. I was a good dancer, and of course I was slim then. And the place, you had to dance with a Yank. Because that's all the men, they were all, the English boys were sent somewhere else. They were in Germany or somewhere, but we got a lot stationed where we were. They even invited us to go to their camps, and they would have dances. And that's the first time I was introduced to bobbing apples. You know, when you bob for the apples, what was it? What is it? But we all had a good time with the Americans, and a lot of girls, including my cousin, who is 100 next August and still living in San Diego. She met a Yank, an Air Force boy, tall, at a Jewish dance. We were making money for a Zionist dance. We were all there. She met this handsome, tall, slim fellow, and they got married when they were 23, and they were still going strong till 2 years ago when he died. And so we got those. We heard a lot about America on she was what they called a GI bride. Did you ever hear of that? They sent the ones that got married, they got married in London. They sent the brides on a ship. Oh, no, nobody else, just GI brides on a ship to America before the others were released from their duties. So that but she was lucky. The boy came from a lovely family, and they lived happily ever after till, unfortunately, when he died about 2 years ago, Harry Feltzer, her mind went. She has not accepted the fact yet. She calls me for about an hour every other day, and she can't accept the fact that he's died, and I have to repeat it. But that was a wonderful marriage. I told her not many people that were married for about over 70 years. But yeah, we enjoyed the company of what we called the Yanks. Any other question? Carol, you haven't given me a question.
Celia?
True, I haven't given you a question, but I've thoroughly enjoyed all the answers. this is absolutely wonderful. And I know I'm speaking for everyone when I thank you so very much for sharing with us. Bravo, yes?
Well, I hope it was what you wanted. And I've enjoyed talking to you all. And it's lovely to see you all. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Celia.
And it's lovely to see you all. God bless.
God bless you.
Thank you all for coming. And I think it's a wonderful turnout.
Thank you.
And it's maybe somebody else would like to give their life story or some talk about some subject, and we could get together again.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
So good to see you.
Good to see you all. God bless. Be
We
well.
love you.
Love you
Love
too.
you.
Celia.
Stay well.
You
It's
too.
been a pleasure.
Thank you. Check with her.
Happy. Wash your hands.
Yeah.
Stay well.
But Michelle's always phone. She phones me every evening at 5:45. Grandma, wash your hands. Ready to eat every day. Okay. God bless. Be
Love
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
all.
much.
Be
You
safe.
all. Thank you, Celia. Love you, sis.
Well, let's hope we can meet in person sometime soon.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you for coming,
Thank
Rabbi.
you. Thank you. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Thank you, Celia. Thank
Sei
you.
gesund, Celia.
Yes. Say gesundheit. Shvua tov, everybody.
Keep smiling. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll call
I was going to ask you what dance